for that very kind introduction. Thank you for being here tonight. Thank you for inviting us into the community. I was sharing, some of you, I think we first met almost 2 years ago when I visited the Indian River Democratic Club for one of your annual galas. And I went home thinking that is such a special place that I was just at, a special group of people. Thank you for having me back this evening. I want to do a couple things tonight. My father was a minister. I talk openly about my faith, but my father used to say, you know, when you speak to a group, you tell them what you're going to say, and then you say it, and then you tell them what you said. I'm going to talk about three things tonight, and we're going to do something a little different. As was mentioned, I'm going across all 67 counties. Tonight is probably our 160th town hall, I believe, since we got into this. But as I've gotten more comfortable, doesn't mean you have, but we're going to try something tonight. It's going to be a little bit of a Maury Povich. I'm going to ask you all to participate here in a minute and ask you your thoughts on a couple things. But here are the three things I want to do. I want to give you a little bit of an introduction to myself, and I want to share with you the values of this campaign, values that I hope to emanate as a candidate, values that I think can lead us back towards the state and the country we need to be. And then the third thing I want to share with you is how we win, because we're going to win in November. I promise you we're going to win. I'm going to ask you to think about right now. In about 5 minutes, I'm going to ask you to participate just very quickly, 3 or 4 of you. I want you to think about something tonight. A time in your life, a big decision where you have changed. You've changed. A job, a career path, a relationship, faith, politics, whatever it might be. I want you to think about it. And for those of you who are brave enough, in about 3 or 4 minutes, I'm going to ask 3 or 4 people to stand up and share your testimony of change. Not just mine. I want to hear yours. So let's start with a little bit more of an introduction about myself. My wife and I live up in Pinellas County, Florida, the Clearwater Beach area. I've had the opportunity. I was born there. As I mentioned, my father was a minister. We moved around the state a bit. I lived in Miami for about 10 years. Lived in Pasco County for another 8 or 10, where I graduated from high school, Pasco County High School. Lived in Pensacola. Lived all over the state. I'm a fifth-generation Floridian. Doesn't make me a lick better than someone who moved here yesterday. But I believe deeply in the state. It is a state that my wife and I have chosen to raise our family in. My wife and I have 2 young kids, 6 and 4. 6 and 4. I'll save you the Google. I'm 53. I'm 53. They're 6 and 4, and every day's a Monday. Every day's a Monday. They inform, obviously, our life experience right now as we're deciding to run for governor. They inform our personal economics, our family economics, our aspirations, our hopes, and our dreams, and everything else. Because if you have had children or grandchildren, and you have children close to you, you know at 6 and 4, you see the world through their eyes. You see their aspirations, but you feel a calling and a duty to make sure that we're doing something to improve their future more than improving ours. So yes, having a 6-year-old and 4-year-old is part of who we are. I also speak openly about my faith. I mentioned that. I want you to stick with me here for just a moment. I don't want to offend anybody. I speak about my faith because I share with you that I'm married, where I live, where I have lived, the fact that we have 2 kids, and yes, I'm a practicing Christian. I'm a preacher's kid. But I share it for this reason. Not to evangelize and not to ask anyone to share that faith with me. If you choose to, that's wonderful, but that's not my ask. I say it because in a state that 8 years ago launched culture wars, it is time we have a governor who understands their personal and private faith stops at the steps of the State House. That is what the Constitution demands. It is what the Constitution ordains. And the people of any faith, of all faith whatsoever, it doesn't dilute your faith to recognize that separation. It empowers your faith. And so, yes, I speak of my faith. For me, that's where some of my values are rooted. But I don't ask anyone else to find their values in their faith. In fact, on this trail, I built such an affinity with those who identify as agnostic or atheist, who on most days are more charitable than those of us who sit in church pews. Basic values, and we're going to talk about those values. The last part of my introduction is my politics. So yes, I had the opportunity to serve in Congress from the Pinellas County area. And I was a Republican when I did that. I apologize for that chapter of my life. Obviously that was before MSNBC. Well, listen, I was a bit of a Bush 41 Republican, never good enough Republican, fought the Tea Party and lost, fought the Freedom Caucus and lost. And as Donald Trump emerged, I was the first and only Republican member of Congress in the 2016 cycle to call on him to drop out of the race, and I never wavered and I never went to. In that environment, for me to use a line you sometimes hear in politics, that I didn't change, my party did. I don't hold my party responsible for my journey. I accept responsibility for my journey. I have changed. I've changed. And I test a different question in politics. Is it okay to change your mind? Is it okay to grow? Is it okay to learn? Because that's part of my story. So this is where we're going to try this new experiment I'm going to do in town halls. I asked you 2 minutes ago, think of a moment in your life when you changed. Is there anyone brave enough tonight to tell us an anecdote? Please, this is the first time we're trying it. Yes, sir. Okay, we got one right here on the aisle.
I'm very proud of that.
Very good.
Happy to be here tonight.
All right. We'll bring the microphone so everybody can hear.
Good evening. I've always been a Democrat, but I've not always learned how to love everybody. And since I've been on the scene, I've learned how to love everyone.
Yes, I changed when I had my children. Future seems something not present. The present doesn't matter as much as the future when I had my children. I live more than of everything that's happening right now, and why we must stand by our children and make sure that the Constitution is followed, our freedom is guaranteed, people's rights are protected, and due process is still the law.
When I found out that there is a large swath of Americans who are comfortable with others being hungry, broke, and disenfranchised. That was parent, Christian, or American, but that really changed me. And I'm so grateful for the Democratic Party, for people who reach out to others.
Very good. Thank you. One last question.
I grew up a minister's child as well in the Pentecostal faith. I grew up hating lots of different people because that's what people told me in church. And I have had a long journey. I went to Bible college, and I am now a proud member of this congregation of UU that welcomes anyone and that spreads the message of love and hope. And so that if I can change, anyone can change.
I cannot tell you how excited I am to hear this, truly. 160 of these. This is the first time I've done it, and I knew we would find commonality, I knew we would find community, and we would find agreement around this question of change. Because in politics, sometimes we look at change as a bad thing. We do. It's reflexive. We're all guilty of it. Right? Oh, that politician changed. I don't trust him anymore. That politician used to stand for something, and now they stand for something else. That is part of why I'm on the road sharing my story. Mine is a story of change. When I served as a Republican in Congress, I didn't like the way some of my votes were landing. I didn't like the way it was impacting our community, and I started a journey then, nearly 15 years ago. And so we're going to talk about tonight where I am on issues that maybe 15 years ago I wasn't. Now what I'll share with you is that my principles, my values have remained the same. And that's why I want to talk about these three values tonight. But folks, change is at the root of good. Change is at the root of good. And for longtime Democrats, for partisans, let me ask you a question. Imagine if Hillary Clinton had remained a Republican. She was the college Republican president at Wellesley. Imagine if Elizabeth Warren had remained a conservative Republican lawyer, which she was in her 40s, until she took a tour of bankruptcy courts and visited with bankruptcy victims and realized that these weren't deadbeats. These were families and individuals who ended up on the streets because of a divorce or because of a health care matter or because of a lost job. Hillary Clinton became a Democrat because of the civil rights movement and Vietnam. Elizabeth Warren became a Democrat because she saw the challenges that families were facing and knew that her party affiliation couldn't satisfy that. Imagine if Barack Obama had never embraced marriage equality. Change is at the root of what is good in politics. Now, not always. My former colleagues have changed a lot. It is unrecognizable what that party now seems to stand for. In my views, I'm not here to condemn or tell anybody that they shouldn't choose a political affiliation over one or the other. I'm a proud Florida Democrat tonight, not a reluctant one. But I want to thank any of the Republicans and independents who have joined us in this room tonight. Because we're going to build a coalition that's going to take this to three values that I had as a Republican. I spent 6 years as an independent, untethered from major party dogma, just thinking about big solutions to big problems. Today I'm a proud Florida Democrat because I see three values that I've tried to exercise throughout my political life. Sure, I've got some things wrong, but these three values I see rooted in Democratic Party tradition, values bigger than our party, big enough to build a new emerging political coalition. First, the economy should work for everybody. The economy should work for everybody. Doesn't mean we should condemn success. We should congratulate success. People find opportunities, they create opportunities, they work hard, they find success. God bless you, congratulations. But we don't have to condemn success to recognize that the economy is not working for everybody. Half of the state tonight has only 2 weeks worth of savings, cannot absorb or handle a lost job or a health care crisis. We have families who are now going without health care, individuals who are going without health care. We have people whose idea of home ownership is now gone forever. They know in this economy they will never aspire to home ownership. We have renters who are jumping rents so quickly that truancy rates in one district in Pensacola continue to increase. Not because parents are being irresponsible, but because they can't afford to stay in their apartments and they have to keep moving. The economy's not working for everybody. Some longtime homeowners right now are victims of a homeowner's insurance market that has collapsed around us, and government refuses to do anything. We have a state that has abandoned public education, and it is barely getting the economy should work for everybody, and it's not. The second value I would share with you is this: government can improve people's lives. Now listen, I think it should be lean and efficient. I'm somebody who will still always look to the private sector first and see if there's a solution there. But if there is not, there are certain functions that government has to step in and improve people's lives. Many of the problems we just discussed: access to affordable health care, empowerment through public education, access to home ownership, the ability to stay in one's home, the ability to have affordable rents, investments in climate science and climate change. Investments in public transportation and upward mobility, whatever it might be, there are certain functions that only government provides. And yes, so government, it might sound like Bill Clinton in 1992, but government can actually improve people's lives. The economy should work for everyone. Government can improve people's lives. And the third value is very simple. It is heartbreaking that it's controversial these days in the state of Florida, but I tell you this, and I will be a governor that stands by this every single day. Absolutely everybody in this state should have their constitutional rights protected and their dignity celebrated, regardless of the color of their skin, where they are born, who they are, or who they are. But they're so much bigger than the Democratic Party. If you're an independent or a Republican tonight, you want the economy to work for everybody. You know that government can step in and help people in a time of need. And yes, you know in your core that absolutely everybody should have their rights protected and their dignity celebrated. That's who we are as a people. That's who we are as a country and who we are as a state. And I will put this test on the third politicians in Tallahassee. Do you think Tallahassee politicians right now believe the economy should work for everybody? No! In an era of Doge, do they think government can improve people's lives? No, they don't. And in a state of culture wars, do you think Tallahassee politicians and our governor right now is ready to stand up and fight for everybody's rights and dignity? Absolutely not. So, that gives us our playbook, folks. That gives us our playbook. If we want to build a coalition and change the direction of the country, these are the values that will allow us to do that. Because as I shared with you in my introduction, someone who is a fifth-generation Floridian, lived all around the state, a 6-year-old and 4-year-old, I will tell you tonight and every night. My wife and I wonder if we should raise our kids in this state. We wonder if we should raise our kids in this state. That is our lived experience as parents. In a state that is gripped by an economic crisis and exhausted by culture wars, is it a responsible decision to commit to raising their children in the state of Florida? That's a hard question to ask. But you don't have to have kids to be asking yourselves those same questions. Is the economy sufficient for you to find your quality of life in the state of Florida? Is it what you thought it would be when you retired here or when you were already living here and retired? Are your savings and are your resources sufficient enough to live out your years in the state of Florida? Do you think that Florida's economy are going to provide upward mobility for your grandkids and your kids? And in a state that launched culture wars, listen, what my Republican friends fail to realize in Tallahassee is that culture wars have victims. Culture wars have victims. Some people are directly impacted there. Our black and brown neighbors, the LGBTQ plus community, are direct victims of culture wars, and our Republican leaders in Tallahassee don't care. But you don't have to be a direct victim to ask yourself, should you tolerate it? And the answer of all people of goodwill is no, we shouldn't tolerate it. So yes, is Florida on the right path? No, I don't think it is. What does it look like to apply those values to policies? I'm going to take through a couple of policies here. We won't go deep until Q&A, because I can put you to sleep in 10 minutes. Instead, I'll take 20 minutes to do it. Listen, an economy that works for everybody, where we accept the role of government in improving people's lives, means a few things. We have an economic crisis largely defined around housing, healthcare, and yes, I think education. We're going to talk about education in a little bit of a different lens than we've talked about it in past cycles, because I think a crisis is emerging that's different than we've seen in past cycles. But first, if we were to suggest that we can improve the economy by ensuring that people have greater housing stability, what does that mean? First, I think the homeowners insurance market in the state of Florida has collapsed and it's not coming back and it will never be affordable again. So, I think we need a state catastrophic fund in the state of Florida. I think we need to fully remove hurricane and natural disaster coverage from the private market, put it in a state sovereign wealth fund, reduce homeowners insurance by 60 or 70%. Well, there's one of the things I like about being a Democrat is we accept math. And science and data and vaccines and all the things that can make it matter. I'm happy to talk about revenue as well. I don't want to hide from that. It would take us about 3 years to populate a hurricane fund so we can fully remove hurricane coverage from the private market, fully cutting your homeowners insurance by 60 or 70% and being a model for all natural disaster states and natural disaster countries around the world. I do think we need a state catastrophic fund. I will also tell you, I think we need significant utility reform. I think it is wrong that our utilities have gotten away with asking for and getting the largest rate increase in American history. That is done because our gubernatorial appointees to the Public Service Commission are willing to do grift, graft, and dead giveaways to our utilities, and they have failed to protect ratepayers, and they have failed to demand clean and renewable energies and protect clean air, clean water, and the environment. So what can we do about it right now? Right now, I think we should cap the return on equity. That means cap the rate of profit for our utilities at the national average. I know this sounds crazy, and before you start thinking, is that socialism or communism or capitalism, what is that? The state already has a regulated monopoly agreement with our utilities, right? Our utilities agree to provide universal services so we can all get energy, and in return, they have to go before the PSC and they get to ask for what their profit can be. The national average for profit is about 9.6, 9.8%, a guaranteed 10% profit for our utilities. Our utilities keep asking for 12 to 13%. And every time you go up a point, it transfers about $400 million from us to them for no reason except they asked for it. And the DeSantis' appointees gave it to them. So I think by statute, we should cap the rate of profit for our utilities at the national average. It's still an almost 10% return, but it protects ratepayers, it protects homeowners, and it protects renters. I also think we need property tax reform. I do. I think we need property tax reform, and my Democratic friends, I would say, let's keep our powder dry until we see what Republicans come up with. Now, I've been a Republican, and Republican math rarely works out. I don't think what they ultimately propose will work out, but let's see it. Here's my big concern. Republicans in Tallahassee and this governor are saying we're going to repeal property taxes. They just want to make your local community a ward of the state. That's what they're trying to do. So that if you're a good red state or a good red community in their eyes, they'll make sure you have resources. But if you're a blue community, they're going to defund you. They don't want you to have resources. They're willing to defund law enforcement, education, and other critical services in the name of property tax abolition. I don't think that's right, but I think we need property tax relief. I really need that. Many of us benefit from Save Our Homes, affordability. We went through the early 2000s and we had a crisis that feels a lot like it does today. Insurance and property taxes. Long-time homeowners couldn't stay in their homes because their property values were going up with no cap on the increase in their taxes. So we came up with good public policy, Save Our Homes and portability. 25 years later, we have the inverted problem. First-time home buyers buy a home from a 20-year homesteader, that second-year tax bill jumps by 300, 400%. That $2,500 a year tax bill jumps to $10,000. And so, yes, I think we should provide first-time home buyer tax relief. Is it a scale $100,000 to $500,000 homestead exemption for first-time home buyers? Is it a 3, 4, 5-year step-up in basis? Whatever it looks like. Maybe we do targeted homestead exemption relief, an additional $100,000 for seniors. Or maybe an additional $100,000 for people in a certain income bracket. We should look at tax relief where we can responsibly provide it without defunding critical services. We shouldn't just impose tax relief. So yes, insurance, taxes, utilities. There are a lot of ways in the housing market that right now there are policies available to our incumbent colleagues in Tallahassee, and they won't do it. But we can when we have the opportunity to serve. When it comes to health care, which is also burdening too many people, I do think we should be a state that expands Medicaid. We should. We are one of only 10 states that has not expanded Medicaid. And we have had enough data now from the other 40 states to know that it not only improves the qualitative health outcomes of beneficiaries and patients, but it's an economic return to the states. The only reason our pro-business governor won't do it is because the idea came from a guy named Barack Obama. He's litigating the politics of 20 years ago when people are going without health care. That's wrong. So yes, let's expand Medicaid. But here's something I'll tell you. After spending all this time on the road for the last year, going across every county, having town halls, I think we are far past an affordability crisis for families. I think we're in an economic crisis right now. We do have people worried about staying in their homes, their ability to keep their home or to afford rent. But when it comes to health care, the number of people now going without health care, not able to afford health care, is hitting a crisis mode. And while Washington dithers and Tallahassee tries to figure out how to further reform this insurance-fueled health care plan we have right now, I've arrived at a very different place. Yes, let's expand Medicaid. But I remember when I was in high school in Pasco County, Florida, in Dade City, if you needed primary health care services, you could walk into a county health clinic. Regardless of the ability to pay, you can get primary health care services for you or your family. I think in a moment of crisis, we need to return to a model in all 67 counties. The primary health care services are available regardless of the ability to pay. If you can't pay, perhaps you're charged $100, $125 like an urgent care clinic. But none of this families and individuals going without health care in 2026. That's a moral wrong. That's a moral wrong. It's a very close partisan space. We're going to talk about a lot tonight. You're not going to be able to pin me down on the left-right spectrum because I don't live on the left-right spectrum. I think we have to take an enterprise business approach to many of our problems and say we're the biggest answers, the best answers to our biggest problems. So yes, maybe a county healthcare model works right now, but maybe we should strive to get beyond it so that it's not a burden of taxpayers for the next 10 to 20 years. But let's see. What I know right now is that families and individuals are in crisis. And we have a duty and a responsibility to respond. So yes, I have proposed now the direct delivery of primary health care services in all 67 counties. Here's the good news. Before somebody walks out and says, oh, Jolly sounds crazy. We're already funding community health centers that provide services across the state. They're just struggling for enough resources to do it. We can make sure the resources are there for community health centers, transition this into what I remember as county health centers and make sure that every individual and family has access to primary health care services. We already have a platform for it. It's not that radical. That platform is funded by my Republican colleagues. The homeowners insurance fund that I talked about, the catastrophic fund. My opponents already called it socialism. I call it cheaper insurance. But guess what? Every year in Tallahassee, my Republican friends fund a hurricane fund, and they sent out a press release last year saying, we got the hurricane fund over $8 billion. Guess what they use it for? To bail out insurance companies. To bail out insurance companies. But the platform already exists. These ideas aren't radical. They just make common sense. It's a very business-friendly enterprise approach to solving our problems. So yes, housing and healthcare. Let's talk about education for a minute when it comes to the crisis that people are facing. We have abandoned public education in the state of Florida for 20 years. We've abandoned it. We shouldn't pretend as though this is reform. This is an attack on public education, an attack on public education. Folks, it is a moral wrong that our teachers are paid dead last in the nation. It is a moral wrong. We are the third largest state, and our teachers are paid dead last in the nation. Out of intent and design by our current politicians in Tallahassee, they are starving public education. And so yes, the state of public education is teachers who are paid dead last in the nation. Failing infrastructure, 80-year-old properties with trailers and portables in the back as classrooms with leaky window air conditions, and the playgrounds a dusty field under an oak tree. And in a state that offers choice, families aren't going to choose that environment because we don't have real choice. We have false choice in the state of Florida. We have abandoned public education, and Florida's families are looking for anything but, because despite the love and commitment and absolute resiliency of our teachers and educators, the truth is that families are leaving our public schools because our public schools have been abandoned. So, here's my proposal. We need a 10-year renaissance in public education in the state of Florida. A 10-year renaissance. I ask you this, if you look at Florida voters and say, should we take a portion of our tourist development tax dollars for the next 10 years and use it to fund teacher pay, give teachers a 30% pay raise and put them in the top half nationally, and fund our Florida infrastructure? If we have Florida families build new committees on a ballot initiative to take money, 10%, 20% from our tourist development tax dollars and put it into public education, Florida's voters will say yes. Because across the state, when we're asked to tax ourselves more, either through a millage or a sales tax, if we know it's going to teacher pay, if we know it's going to reducing gun violence in our schools, voters vote for it. Listen, no governor in the state of Florida is going to crimp the tourist industry. I represent Pinellas County, I understand that we're going to make sure our tourist economy continues to grow and to thrive. But we don't have a crisis of convention centers in the state of Florida. We have a crisis in education. And I think it's right to take some of our tourist money and put it into where the real problems are for Floridians right now. And that's in education. I want to talk about the choice program as well. Because as we create a 10-year renaissance in public education, we have Florida's families again wanting to rush into our public schools. But what do we do with the choice schools that are so popular right now? I don't think we should shut down choice. Follow me on this. But we need a whole new set of rules for our choice schools. What do I mean by that? I'll share with you something tonight that is an absolute truth, and I'm going to say it every day until November, and I hope I get fact-checked because then let me talk about it more. A choice school in the state of Florida tonight does not have to teach a kid to read. A choice school in the state of Florida tonight does not have to teach a kid to read. A first-grade kid who can't read, they get to kick him out. They get to kick him out. They get to send him back to public school and say, send us the kid who can read. They don't have to provide an individual education program. They don't have to provide tutoring. A child who wants access to excellence in academics, they don't have to provide trigonometry in 10th grade. A choice school doesn't have to provide access to the trades or to the arts. They don't have to provide any of this. They don't have to provide curriculum standards. They don't have to provide testing standards. And so the answer, I think, is simple. We'll keep choice. But guess what? If you take a voucher, you have to provide the same services and standards and offerings. Partners to Florida's families. Well, one more thing. You don't get to take the voucher and charge tuition on top of it.
Thank you.
Because if you go back to the root of what Jeb Bush was suggesting 25 years ago, it was that Florida's families, most in need of economic assistance, are getting left behind by public education. Well, guess what? 70% of our voucher recipients were already enrolled in private school when they took that first year voucher. And guess what? When the schools start charging tuition on top of that, those with the greatest economic challenges can no longer take access or take advantage of choice anyway. So yes, we need a 10-year renaissance in public education in the state of Florida, but we need a whole new set of rules on our choice schools. And when we do that, we're not fighting against choice, we're fighting for Florida's kids. We're fighting for Florida's families. So, I mentioned the third value, a place where everybody's rights are celebrated, their dignity, their rights are protected, their dignity is celebrated. And here's what I mean by that on a very top-line way. If I have the opportunity to be your next governor, the culture wars are over on day one. The culture wars are over. Let teachers teach. Bring back the books. Embrace science. I'm going to back this old school principle that I thought was republicanism of local control is best. If a community wants to honor Black Lives Matter Plaza or its LGBTQ plus community, I'll buy you a bucket of paint. Ending culture wars also, I think, means an old school Republican position, which means keep government out of your doctor's office, out of your bedroom, out of your life. Science. You know what I get to do on day one as your next governor? Fire the Surgeon General of the state. I'm not a politician who thinks like that, but sometimes after I do and affirm and I swear, I get to write the "You're fired" letter to our Surgeon General. It also means putting people in place in our Public Service Commission that believe in clean air and clean water. It means putting an education commissioner in place that's going to fight for kids and for teachers and for academia, who's going to recognize the influence and impact and empowerment that comes with diversity and equity and inclusion. I know I'm going a little bit long. I want to touch on one other thing because I think we should have this conversation tonight. There's something I talk about on the trail that every advisor says, don't do this, don't do it. They say, don't talk about guns. I'm going to talk about guns every day. You're going to is going to fight like hell to stop the next school shooting and stop the next mass shooting. Here, and let's have an intellectually honest conversation. I will not be a governor, and I don't think there's a candidate out there that is willing to take a firearm from a law-abiding citizen. I promise you I'm going to protect that right of every law-abiding citizen to exercise their Second Amendment rights and to own and use a firearm. I promise you. I'm not going to take a firearm from a law-abiding citizen. But I am going to fight like hell to stop the next school shooting because there's so much more we can do than my Republican friends refuse to do. And when I look at Tallahassee, I say, then what are you willing to do to stop the next school shooting? Because I haven't seen it yet. I haven't seen it yet. This state is desperate for universal and comprehensive background checks. We have a criminal conviction check right now, and let me tell you how that's different than a comprehensive and universal background check. In a home where there are repeated incidents of domestic violence, where a victim is unwilling, understandably, to provide a victim statement, where there's not enough information for charges to be brought, where there's not a red flag scenario. The police can be called several times, and yet still that purchaser falls through the system. That next time they go to Walmart, they buy a gun on demand, they go home and they use it. I'm not trying to take the firearm from the law-abiding citizen, but I am trying to take it from the serial domestic abuser who is yet to be charged. If you look at the school shootings, there's always a public policy fail point. There's a storage failure. There's an overlooking of what should be a red flag situation. In the Pulse nightclub scenario, there was someone who was not allowed to buy a ticket to board a plane but they walked in and bought an assault weapon on demand and used it to kill 49 people celebrating love at a dance club. Yes, I'm going to fight like hell to prevent that person from being able to buy a weapon. I do think we need to talk about comprehensive background checks. I think we need to talk about storage requirements and enforcement of those storage requirements. I think we should talk about training, and I think we should ask Florida voters if they support licensing as well. I understand not everybody agrees with this. I was with a gentleman in Gainesville, and he said, it won't work, it won't work, it won't work. And I said, sir, I'm going back to my original principle. Nothing I just said would take your firearm away. This does not infringe on somebody's right to own a firearm, but it does protect our children. I was doing a school tour in Seminole County about 6 months ago. It was a brand new, beautiful elementary school. And as I was going through, I noticed that every classroom had the same carpet pattern. But it was unusual. It was unusual for me to notice. But by the 7th, 8th, 9th classroom, I finally asked the principal, I said, why is it that in every room there's this triangle of blue carpet? She said, that's where we train our kids to run when the bullets start. We don't need more blue carpet. We need gun violence prevention legislation. I know y'all came out tonight. I'm talking way too long. I'm sorry. Let's finish up with this. How we win. How we win. Because we're going to win this race. We're going to win this race. When I say we, I mean all of us. Those of us in the room and those of us across the state. I mean Democrats, Independents, and Republicans. I mean people who just believe in a coalition of goodwill who wants everybody's rights to be protected and everybody's lives to be improved. That's not a partisan statement. We have an opportunity to do something in Florida right now. We do. We're seeing it in the data across the state. The story was shared, something I shared with my daughter. Some of you may have heard this story, but you know what? As mentioned, I'm 53. I'm a first-time dad. Our kids are 6 and 4. I'm still amazed that 2 children can come out of the same womb. It's so dramatically different. Our daughter Cece, Caroline and Claire, we call her Cece. She's 6. She's going to be just fine in life, folks. She's going to be governor before I'm governor. We got to set up the guardrails. She's going to ping pong off on that. Boom. She's gone and not looking back. Probably by 2nd grade. Our 4-year-old son Teddy has already told my wife he's not leaving the house. He means it. She thinks it's a great idea, and I resign myself to that. So I'm reading my daughter one night. We're in bed, and yeah, it's a beautiful thing for those of you who have had this experience. You know, at least for my daughter and I, that's the time of the day where she just unpacks everything. Everything. Right? The heartbreaks, the challenges, the fears, the playground politics, whatever it might be, she just starts talking and won't stop. So I'm in the middle of reading one night, and she just starts crying. And she says, Dad, I don't want you to run here. And she meant it. Meant it. It was a serious and sober moment. And 2 things happened in that moment. First, I felt the raw indictment of where we are as a country right now. That a 6-year-old looks at politics and sees it as vile and mean and gross. And doesn't want anything to do with it and says, Dad, please don't do this. Please don't do this. When I was 6, I was looking up at the Reagan-Carter election. I didn't know much about the candidates. I didn't understand the issues, but I saw it as this great civic experiment. I saw it as this aspirational moment. I wanted to know what my parents were going to do, what my teachers were going to do. I didn't look at any of those candidates as being evil. But here we are, a 6-year-old child saying, please don't do anything in politics. Don't drag my family into politics. I wish I could tell you that one election cycle, one candidate is capable of fixing everything that divides us and that fails us tonight. I don't think that's the case, but I do think that this election cycle has given us the best opportunity we've had to begin to come forward. The second thing that happened, and for me as a matter of my faith, I just feel it was providence. The words that came to me that night that was shared with you earlier. I said to my daughter, I said, sweetheart, when you have a chance to change the world, you take it. You take it. You don't know what's been ordained. You don't know how it turns out. But in a moment where we feel democracy crumbling around us, where we see masked agents in the streets rounding people up, where we see grift, graft, and raw corruption of our democracy, in Tallahassee and in Washington alike, where we wonder, will the next election actually happen? Where we wonder, depending on who you love or who you worship or the color of your skin or where you were born, will your rights be protected? Many of you in this room tonight, I know, have kids or grandkids, women, young women, who have said, I'm not going to live in the state of Florida because I don't have reproductive freedom there. I know many of you have been personally touched by somebody in the LGBTQ plus community who says, I'm not coming to Florida. Maybe they are snowbirds, maybe they're visitors, or maybe they're a family member who says, I got to get out of this state. In this moment, when we know what hangs in the balance, we each have to do what's within reach. We each have to do what's within reach. For some of you, that means coming here tonight, listening to a politician who goes on a little too long. For others, it means making sure you're registered to vote, making sure your vote by mail has actually been updated. For others, it's giving $5 or $10 or $50. For some, it's making phone calls. For some, it's going to the No King's rally. Whatever it is, you do what's within reach in this moment. And here's the good news. Here's the good news. We are all doing it, and we're doing it together, and it's working. It's working on that. It's working. In Florida, we've had 2 congressional special elections since the inauguration. Each one of them swung towards Democratic candidates by 15 and 16 points. We've had state by 15 and 21. We've had Democrats outperforming in the villages. We see the results in the state of Virginia. It's how you get an Alabama Stanford. It's how you get a Mike and Cheryl. It's how you get an Andy Bashir in Deep Red, Kentucky. And it's how you get a David Jolly in the state of Florida. This race right now in the Deep Red state of Florida is tied. It's tied. We can win the governorship when we each committing to do what's within reach. And I'm going to share with you something you're going to see on TV in November. On election night in November. Don't listen to any of the pundits, by the way. But I'm going to tell you what to watch for. What to watch for. I'm going to tell you right now what the story is going to be. November. On Tuesday night, election night, the story's not going to be that David Jolly just got elected the governor of Florida. Sure, we're going to win, but that's not the story. The story's going to be that Florida's voters for the first time in 30 years, have chosen a new political direction. The story's going to be in the deep red state of Florida, home of the president, and where Ron DeSantis has had a tighter grip on national politics than any governor we've seen in decades. That in that state, Florida's Democratic Party led a resurgence rooted in democratic values, that the economy should work for everyone. Government can improve your lives through access to education, healthcare, home ownership, and yes, we should be a place where everybody's rights are protected, their dignities are celebrated. That Florida's Democratic Party led a coalition bigger than their party to bring in independents and Republicans, and have created something that we have not seen in national politics in a generation. The other 49 states are going to have to look at Florida and say, what just happened? What just happened? We're going to do Q&A. And how are we going to moderate? You want me to call? Someone else call?
Many of you may have prepared questions. If you do and want to read them, you can stand in the aisle and we have mic carriers around who will come to you. You can raise your hands and we'll find you. And the congressman will have about an hour.
We got all night. Okay.
We got 2 minutes, right?
2 minutes.
2 minutes. Here we go. 2 minutes.
hopefully I'm only one of several NPAs in this audience, I hope, okay? So I'll make a real quick question. As you know, I'm sure, Democrats are a distinct minority in our county and other counties, like Brevard and all over the state, I'm sure, okay? I hope you also are aware that I think it was yesterday that former Democratic Senator Clara McCaskill was on MSNBC, and she made a very interesting statement. She said that if Democratic candidates are not actively going after the independent and what we call moderate Republican votes this election cycle, they're making a huge mistake, okay? So my question very simply is, what specific actions is your campaign taking to go after those votes?
Yeah. So, wise words from Claire McCaskill. I agree with you. You know, she and I didn't get off to a good start. She, for those of you who are regular MSNBC viewers, if you're not, congratulations. You're probably more sober and have more savings right now. She was first introduced to the MSNBC audience. I was about 2 years into my contract with them, and we were at the round table with Nicole Wallace, and I was making this impassioned case about why Nancy Pelosi should move more quickly to impeach Donald Trump. And Claire's pounding her fist saying, I'm not going to listen to some former Republican tell us Democrats what we should do. And I said, well, Claire, I sound like more like a Democrat today than you do. We started leaning into each other, and Nicole said, commercial break. But she's one of my favorite people in politics and in life and on TV, and we're good friends, and I think she's right about this. So let me give you a little bit of the data, and then we'll just talk values. Here's the good thing about the races we're winning right now. This is really important. Listen, many of you are involved in the Democratic Party. Thank you for your effort. Many of you are involved in voter registration. Thank you for that effort as well. We are outperforming as Democrats by 15, 16, 20, 21 points, but we're not registering more Democrats, actually. That, you know, broad brush speaking, the delta against Republicans remains what it is, about 1.4 million votes. But we're winning hearts and minds. We're winning hearts and minds. And the way I think we close the registration gap is by focusing on winning hearts and minds. When you win hearts and minds, more Democrats turn out and show up to vote, because too many of them stayed home last cycle. When you win hearts and minds, your independents and your soft Republicans start to say, hey, maybe this is a race that I'll actually consider voting for a Democrat. When I mention doing what's within reach, think about it. If you're a Republican in the state of Florida tonight, a registered Republican, maybe what's within reach is considering voting for a Democrat for the first time in 30 years. And so we need to, as I bear responsibility for this, I say we need a campaign and a platform for 2026. We don't need to relitigate 24 and 22 and 20. What do I mean by that? In 22, the last time we had a statewide ballot like this, a Senate race, a gubernatorial race, CFO, and so forth, Charlie Crist was the Democratic nominee for governor, and he lost by 18 points. 18 points. What we sometimes forget is Val Jennings was the U.S. Senate candidate on that same ballot, top of the ticket, $80 million in her campaign war chest. She lost by 16. Our CFO candidate lost by 20. You see, in 2022, emerging from COVID and culture wars, we weren't tooled as Democrats to address what voters were telling us. Voters tell us what they want. Right now, voters are telling us, I'm in an economic crisis, and I need big solutions to help me solve this. I need to feel hope again. I need to believe in something better again. Because I wake up every day right now distressed that by the end of the day, our entire experiment might be gone. I wake up every day wondering how my kids are going to get health care, if education is going to be there for them. So our opportunity is to build solutions for what voters are asking us for. The reason I led with values is because I do believe those values are rooted in Democratic Party tradition, but for the independent and Republican, there's nothing controversial about saying that the economy should work for everyone, government should be limited and efficient but can improve people's lives, and everybody's rights should be protected. Those are values that independents, Republicans, and Democrats can all exercise together. And so my messaging, in addition to the way the data is showing us Democrats and Republicans are turning out, my messaging is also geared towards ensuring that we give reason for independents and Republicans to say, maybe in this race. Look, I think we've got a shot at picking up the U.S. Senate race in the state of Florida. But I will tell you this, there's going to be a lot of voters in this race. Maybe the last voter that wins the governor's race for us on election night is going to vote for a Democratic governor, but still vote for a Republican Senate candidate. Because one of the things we see in behavior behavioral science among voters is that voters are willing to vote for governors. They litigate gubernatorial races differently than they litigate congressional and Senate races. We think about it as a big city mayor's race. Well, Bob Graham and Lawton Child used to talk about the responsible administration of government. Is government educating my kids? Do we have good transportation? Do we have clean air? Do we have smart growth? Are our communities safe? When we run a race that is focused on directly addressing where the needs of people are right now, that's how I think we give reason to bring in independents and Republicans. Now, broadly speaking, my time in the independent space was also involved in advocating for open primaries, for redistricting reform, for public financing of campaigns. I actually think we withdraw democracy reform measures. Now, Democrats right now are going to have to wrestle with whether to unilaterally disarm and open up primaries or wait for some type of new state construct. Could be a controversial issue when we talk about diluting votes, particularly in our black and brown communities, unfairly. But I do think we should move to nonpartisan redistricting commissions and open primaries in the state of Florida. I do. And regardless of whether we get there, I think we should be a Democratic Party that recognizes we need to grow our coalition. And the way that starts is by combining independents and Republicans. I don't think it's too controversial. I think there's an opportunity to do it this cycle. And when I mentioned at the end how we will have built a new emerging political coalition, please really think about this. Think about this. Since Trump emerged, you can argue since Bush 43 emerged, we have not seen a political coalition threaded together like you just suggested. And yet, we can't win if we don't do that. So necessity has to be the mother of our invention in this, and we have to go to the independents and Republicans and invite them in to be a part of it. The last thing I'll say on this, it does not mean diluting away from our democratic values and positions. Absolutely not. Those who suggest we have to dilute away, no, we don't. We have to amplify our values. But maybe we talk about it in a different way, right? Maybe I have the opportunity as a former Republican to talk about old school Republican principles of staying out of your life. That is how I defend reproductive freedom, and that's how I defend the trans community as well. Love who you want to love, exercise your life how you want to exercise your life, and then try to help everything. To me, that's what we're talking about. Maybe it has a different approach and a different sound to it than 24 is 22, but it amplifies our values. It doesn't dilute our values.
All right. Real quick question here. First of all, thank you for being here. My name is Dan McDowell, and I'm actually running for Housing 33 up a little bit around there. You don't need to, I mean, you can't do this alone. What are you going to do, or what can I do, what can we do to help you so I can write those damn bills so we can get them signed off on?
We have to build a movement. We have to build a movement. Or we have to capture a movement. Right? To say build a movement, I want to be very careful about that. Look, we all know how politics works. The people who are capable of building movements, you can put me on TikTok and I'm going to look awkward and I'm not cool, right? I'm a 53-year-old white guy with salt and pepper hair. I'm not going to build a movement. Florida's voters are building a movement. And then we have to build the apparatus as candidates that allow the movement to actually win and take hold and take place. So you and I are going to hit the trail together. That's one way we're going to do it. We also, very quickly on resources, you know, the Florida Democratic Party has been abandoned by national Democrats. We don't have the financial resources we need right now. One of my experiences in the independent space is that you see resources flood in when there's a dynamic candidate environment, right? The candidate doesn't have to be dynamic, but a dynamic candidate environment, right? When people believe that Florida's within reach. When we get to the summer and we realize these polls are even, that Florida can flip, you'll see the resources come in. Here's my commitment, it has been since I started this race. I do think if we end up in that environment, the candidates committee, the candidate will end up with a bulk of resources that come into Florida. And my commitment is to use those resources to open field offices all around the state, much like Barack Obama did, but to give those field offices and infrastructure and resources to down ballot candidates and to the party for an infrastructure to lift up all candidates.
Hi, thanks. I'm not a Democrat, and I'm very skeptical. I have three things I want to discuss with you. One is, as I look around, I'm one of the youngest people in the room. I'm 110 years old. You can't do it without the youth vote, and they don't like to vote. How, so question number one is, how are you going to get them to get out there and do it? Because that's a real challenge. And I know that I work with kids. Second, your opponents. And we're not really sure who your opponents are exactly, but I'm pretty sure that we're not going to like them. And they're going to do things in the Trump way. And that's a lot to overcome. And it's one thing to, try and be better than, what Michelle Obama saying about going hot. It didn't necessarily work. How do you address that? And my last thing is, let's say you are the governor, and I hope you are. I agree with just about everything you said. But you're going to have to deal with a legislature. And that legislature may not see things the way you do. And how will you address that?
Yeah, that's right. All right, so let's quickly take through. I'll tell you how I'm working with young people. I am begging them to know. I am begging them. When we find a young person, I say, hey, tell me your story. Why are you here? Do you want to be a part of this campaign? But I say it because it's also a broader philosophy of mine. Look, I'm trying to build a coalition of leadership shoulder to shoulder. The current governor is not the smartest person in the state. Your next governor is not going to be either. I'm not threatened by people who are smarter than I am. I want to surround myself by subject matter experts and tell them about I want to hand the state university system back over to academics and people who understand in many ways we have coalition spaces as well, right? I grew up the son of a rural Southern Baptist conservative preacher. I need a diverse coalition of people. I need African American leadership within our campaign. Not just because we need the visibility of a broad coalition that looks like the state, but because it makes our coalition stronger and more capable of leadership. I need the immigrant community, our Hispanic community, to be a part of this coalition. I need our LGBTQ plus community to be a part of it. I need our young people to be a part of it. I need independents and Republicans. So one of the things I offer to do everywhere I go is to hand over the keys to the campaign. And this is your campaign as much as it is mine. So part of it is the spirit of leadership to say, your voice isn't just wanted, it's needed. I need young people to be a part of this. I need to better understand what are the challenges to rent, to home ownership, to raising a child. What's the impact of a state that has universal child care versus one that doesn't? We need those voices in our campaign. Part of it then is technique, right? As I mentioned, I'm not going to be cool on TikTok. It's not going to happen. But one of the things I've done is I've offered young people, hey, let me into your digital world. Instead of asking you to come into mine, why don't you let me into your digital world? Bring me onto your platform so we can talk. We can talk practice, we can talk sports, we can talk life, we can talk whatever you want, maybe hopefully politics. So we have to hand over the keys to that campaign a little bit. Young people, and then go high, go low, and then the legislature. Go high, go low. Listen, I'm just going to be honest with you, folks. I have two great reservations about being in the race. Look, I've been out of politics long enough to tell the truth, if you can't tell. I was last on the ballot 10 years ago. I have no interest in a vanity run. I have no interest in running to do something else. I believe that this is an opportunity where the entire state has a shot to win, and we all have to do our part, and for me that means run as the candidate. Two reservations. Is it worth the sacrifice that my family has? I get you that bad. I get you that bad. If it had that, I should be at home with my kids. Second thing I'm worried about, in the last 90 days of a race like this, I'm going to get destroyed. Destroyed. I've been through this before. I've been through what at the time was the most expensive congressional race in history. We had to move. Our goddaughter was questioning why they're painting me as the enemy of women. I got accused of arms trading with Pakistan. I know what they're going to come after me. I know what they're going to come after me. One is going to be trust. You can't trust each other. You know, what happens as an independent is you stand in the middle of the road, you get run over. So I could excite you by saying he's an enemy of women, or I could excite you by saying that he supports trans rights. If it's what gets you angry, that's what they're going to use against me. I'll also share with you something that's already in the news, but they haven't used it yet. About 10 years ago, I worked for someone who turned out to be a really bad guy. I was an employee, I wasn't an officer, I didn't have any corporate control. We woke up about a year ago and learned he stole $100 million from special needs families. Yeah, he was my employer. I learned about it when his family learned about it, when his wife learned about it. He was one of these guys who liked to collect politicians. He gave money to Rick Scott and Marco Rubio and myself and Pam Bondi and all these others. But they're going to paint a picture of me being part of that group. Now, I've spent decades working within the disability community, particularly the IDD community. You know, the scriptures say what my enemy intends to use for bad, I'm going to use for good. I'll have the full conversation. I'm not like Rick Scott. I don't have to plead the fifth, and I don't have to hide. Maybe they don't go down that lane. Maybe I shouldn't even be talking about it tonight. I think they're going to go down that lane, and I'll ask you if you see commercials about it. Come back and ask me any questions you have. But I'm going to use that and turn it around and say, you know what? Under Jeb Bush, we had the wait list for services to our IDD community, intellectual developmental disabilities, down to zero. Zero. If an individual or family needed state services for an IDD individual, they got them. The backlog is now 14 years. 14 years. Our current state policy is to wait for somebody to emerge in a crisis before we actually provide services for them. I think that's wrong. So yes, I'll take all the hits on that. Crucify me, I'm working for this guy who turned out to be a bad guy. If it gives me one opportunity to say, let's build a coalition to provide services for the IDD community, they currently aren't happening. So, we're going to get this right. Our reputation is good. I'm going to have to convince my mom to still vote for me. I still don't think that necessitates going negative for this year. Now, it doesn't mean we don't highlight the contrast. Jay Collins just got in the race on the Republican side. I call him an American hero. He lost a leg overseas, came home, requalified, went back into combat operations. That's an American hero. But Jay Collins offered the bill to roll back child labor law protections. Jay Collins wants to roll back the courtroom protections. We're going to talk about those things. I think that Byron Donald will continue to abandon public education, fund school choice, and in a way that drifts and grasps for his own personal fortunes. We'll talk about that. We don't have to go low as they go low, but we do need to be able to have the resources to tell people this is the opportunity between the two candidates. I will tell you this, when I was the only Republican to oppose Donald Trump in the 2016 Congress, I'm so glad I did that for this reason. I ended up, you could argue I lost my race over that. But I got to sleep well at night every day since. I know it's about that. I hate it for my kids. I hate it for my kids. We're willing to do it. We're going to get through it. We've gone through these bumps and bruises before in politics and as candidates. But I'm not going to do something I regret. And the thing I would regret is a cheap shot. We don't have to take a cheap shot on the other side. Let them do that, and at some point, let's expose it. Look, if we have a few more minutes, let's get a little more personal.
Oh, you're... Oh, sorry.
It's also in the paper. I'm not sharing anything. But there's a point at which they can go so negative that it works against them. Truly, we see it. We see it. We hate all this stuff. When I was a teenager, so my first congressional race, about 3 weeks ago, story popped. When I was a teenager, I was involved in a vehicle accident that took a pedestrian's life. It was a weird quirk of state law. The pedestrian was ticketed posthumously, and I was atoned. Nonetheless, it was a tragedy. His name was Blair Warren Rose. He was engaged to a woman named Sandra Bennett. They lived as our pedestrian. I carried with me. They decided to hit me with that in my congressional race. Daniel Webster found me and said, listen, kid, you're going to win this race. Is when they go that far into the gutter, they're going to lose. People are tired of that. Part of what we're talking about building with independents and Republicans, with people of goodwill, common decency. is that we all believe in something better tonight. We believe there's something better available in our politics. And we believe our current leaders aren't giving it to us. If anything, they're driving us further down the road. I think we've gone too far. We'll go through the typical shenanigans and hits in the campaign, but we're going to come out on top, and we're going to have our dignity in place as a state that rejects these types of politics. Look, I mentioned as governor, Democratic governor, my wife and I had asked ourselves two questions. Can you win? And if you win, can you be effective? I know we can win. I've shared with you that analysis. Can you be effective? First, we have the appointment process, as I mentioned. Surgeon General, Education Commissioner, Public Service Commission. We can return the state to adult division. I do think if Florida's voters elect a Democratic governor, we'll probably see the erosion of the Republican supermajority. We might have someone who's going to help us do that. And I also know this. If Florida's voters elect a Democratic governor, the politics in this state will have dramatically changed. It will not be the environment we see in Tallahassee right now. The legislature will have to worry less about the Democratic governor and more about their voters, because Florida's voters would have just asked to go back to a state that embraces public education, that is willing to use government to deliver health care and to solve the homeowners insurance crisis. They would have just demanded the state end the culture wars and go back to a place where everybody's rights are protected. So if that is the political environment, then my job is to work with Republicans on how we do that. Look, as I mentioned, the state catastrophic fund, they already have a hurricane fund. Let's use their platform to say, maybe instead of bailing out insurance, we start bailing out homeowners and we start to fund it more. Maybe we look at early childhood education or universal child care and we say, look, I don't know if the economics turn out right or not, but for over 20 years, Republicans have been supporting universal pre-K, but it's just half day for 4-year-olds. What if we try a pilot program for full day for 4-year-olds? See what the economic impact is, or we move it to 3-year-olds. I think there are ways to work with Republicans on many of these priorities that the state would have just demanded a new leadership for. And then the last piece is the Republican legislature, for the first time in 30 years, will face a Democratic governor with a line item veto. And I'll use it all. I'll do more things.
Hi, so I'm one of the Democrats who hope to get involved over here. The question I have is, with everything that we saw happen in Minneapolis over the Christmas holiday and all of the just blatant violations of the Fourth Amendment, the 14th Amendment, how do you plan on protecting the citizens of Florida from federal agencies that are clearly stepping over the line and drunk with their power?
I do think we have seen individual ICE agents violate the Constitution and the individual rights of individuals, and I would use the governor's office to litigate that question like that. I really would. Look, they don't have to run through streets with masks. Our sheriff's department doesn't do that. Our police officers don't do that. You know, my wife said, if somebody showed up to my door with a mask on, I'm not opening it. And you're telling us without reasonable suspicion they get to break down that door, they get to drag somebody out of the car? That's a violation, as you mentioned, of the Fourth Amendment. It's also a violation of individual due process. They're violating the Constitution right now because Donald Trump and Kristi Noem have given them license to. Somebody asked me a question about Tim Walz's response to Minnesota and about Kristi Noem, and I said, you know what? I served with Kristi Noem and I served with Tim Walz, and I trust Tim Walz. As a governor, I would not require municipalities to sign the 287G agreement, and I don't think municipalities should sign it. Now, if they were on the counter propose that we do a multi-jurisdictional agreement that protects individual due process, if you don't get to wear a mask running through the neighborhoods of our city, well, then I trust local law enforcement if they decide that that's the right way to do it. Because I want to bring back the old school Republican principle here. And it gets into something I want us to be very careful about as Democrats. We should not let the other side paint us as being soft on crime. We should not. What Tallahassee and Washington are doing right now is they're not fighting crime, they're fighting communities. They're fighting communities looking for crime. And it's wrong. It's wrong. I actually think we should trust local law enforcement to know how best to keep a community safe. If that means going after sex crimes, or drug crimes, or gun crimes, or gang violence, or immigration, make sure local law enforcement leadership has the resources they need so we can be a state that remains tough on crime and provides for safe communities. Now, here's why we also have the opportunity to talk about this as Democrats. We should be tough on crime because we best understand or willing to address the disparate impacts on black and brown communities and criminal justice over the past decade. We do. We should address that. We should address that. But we also understand something else. There's a higher propensity of violent and property crimes in native-born American communities tonight than in our immigrant communities. It is specifically wrong what this governor and president are doing, and it's morally wrong as well. But that doesn't mean we should abandon enforcement against violent and property crimes. It doesn't mean we should abandon enforcement against people who break the law. So what does it mean to be a Democratic governor who's tough on crime? It means if you were born here, if you immigrated here, from Venezuela, Cuba, Haiti, Ohio, Pennsylvania, New York, Michigan. Or if you're a dirty politician who steals $10 million from the Medicaid program for Hope Florida. If you break the law in the state of Florida, you'll be investigated and we'll hold you accountable.
So I divide my time between newspapers in Florida, and I've chosen to vote in Florida. I was urged to do that by the Democratic Committee. Ironically, the first election had to do with the school board, and we were urged to vote for one of the Republican school board members. She was the less crazy candidate. I wanted to speak down and ask you a question, is that we certainly in the news see DeSantis' name on the head of the paper every day. He's there doing something. If it's not Trump, it's DeSantis. But what I don't know is, I know about the races for governor, but I don't know about the races for senators and congressmen. And I don't know how well you can link up with people that support you, who would be running for Congress and Senate, and congressmen and senators.
Sure. So, great question. The question was about the ability to unify Democrats either around the slate, up ballot, down ballot, whatever that looks like. So part of me going around the state for the past years, I've had the great opportunity to meet many of our down ballot candidates and other potential candidates. We have a great crop of Democratic candidates in the state of Florida tonight, and we do nationally. And here's what I have experienced among Democrats writ large right now. This is a very unified Democratic Party. This is a really unified Democratic Party right now. Of course, we're having family conversations about different candidates, about primaries, but listen, this is a very unified Democratic Party. I got the question on TV the other day, what direction is the Democratic Party going, left or right? I said, we're going forward. We're going forward. The reason I talk about whether values the economy should work, government can improve people's lives, and everybody's rights should be protected is because we all agree on that. And so, yes, maybe the answers look a little different in Indian River than they do in Pensacola or Miami or Nocatee or Tueg, but they look different, but they reflect the same values. That's true nationally as well. Spanberger, Sherrill, Bashir, Jolly, we're all fighting for those values to go forward. So if we have a unified party, then the other element I'm discovering is, because of the result of lack of investment actually in Florida, we actually have the need and the urgency and the import right now of building, I believe, a slate at the state level. I actually think in this environment we should unify early around a gubernatorial candidate, a CSO, an attorney general candidate, and an agriculture candidate on a unified message that we can put before the voters as a brand and have a unified voice about what that looks like. But I think we can translate to our state legislative candidates as well, to our U.S. Senate candidate, and to our congressional candidate. That is my commitment. When I mentioned that I think we'll see a lot of resources come into the state, I really do. Listen, our fundraising is about exactly what I expected it to be Florida and almost a year out. And my anticipation is that as we continue to show the polls are even, I've had this conversation with the national donors, the national party, and so forth, we're going to see a tremendous investment start sometime midsummer into Florida because we'll have the ability to accomplish what we're talking about tonight. But then we have to organize it around a unified slate of candidates, a U.S. Senate candidate who will be at the top of the ticket. The top race is going to be the U.S. Senate race. The gubernatorial race will be next, and then the congressional races. We've got to get around the state together, demonstrating our democratic values, and win this as a team. My great fear, and thus far I think we've been able to avoid it, as a circular firing squad against each other, we're going to lose it. Our commitment tonight has to be to unify. That doesn't mean no primaries. Let's just have primaries where they're constructive family conversations and we all emerge with resources and unified. I think we've got that within reach this cycle.
We have time for 2 more questions.
Hi, I just want to thank you so much for coming here because we rarely get Democrats to come to River County. You were my favorite Republican, but now that you're a Democrat that's in the borough, don't tell Michael Steele.
Michael needs to leave, by the way. He needs to become a Democrat.
The gun issue, I didn't hear, I wanted to talk about healthcare, but the gun issue real quick. I want to know your position on banning assault weapons.
I'm for banning the transfer of assault weapons in the state of Florida.
I love your idea about going back to county health departments, because when I grew up, I had the same thing. I'm 56, I'm a little older, but and I know exactly what you're talking about. The problem I think we're having here, I know in this county, because I have a mom who's 80, so she's on Medicare, is a doctor problem. They are abandoning Medicare patients, okay? I don't know if this is about because they're getting paid more by private insurance, or they're going concierge.
It's the reimbursement rate.
Right. And also, I know county health department doctors don't get paid a lot, so I think that's going to be an issue too. And I just want to know where we can get the doctors to want to work for county health departments.
Yeah, this is a great question. Listen, in a very cerebral way, I worry in the next 10 to 20 years about the macroeconomic conditions of this state. I think it is becoming a home for the rich and the reckless and leaving everybody else behind. And that is not sustainable for society. And listen, those of us who have mobility, financial mobility to leave, that's one thing. But many in the state have no mobility at all. I'm not willing to accept a permanent underclass in the state of Florida. I'm not willing to do it. We have to fight like, and that doesn't mean everybody's outcome is exactly the same. But this notion of equality of opportunity that I believed in as a Republican, I believe in as a Democrat, but Republicans in D.C. at least used to say equality of opportunity as though that was the last page of the book. I think it's the first page of the book. Equality of opportunity is a calling for policy changes. A kid born tonight 5 miles north of my kids does not have the same opportunities, does not have the same access to education or to health care or to transportation even. And so I think there's a role for government to step in. So when it moves to healthcare specifically, look, I will stay short on this because when you're talking reimbursement rates in Medicare and Medicaid, we're definitely putting people to sleep. But I have been intrigued. If we were to put together an economic team to help figure out how do we move Florida into the next decade and beyond in a place where people have upward mobility of home ownership, the ability to afford rent, access health care, and quality education, I have wondered at times about a new model program where the state provides a reimbursement rate delta above the federal reimbursement rate. Some of you in the medical industry might understand this. If not, hopefully I'm using lane terms enough. But right now, if you go pay a doctor $100 to look at your knee, you walk in, you give them cash, and they take it, great. Your insurance company might pay them $80 or may pay them $180, and they charge you $100. Who knows? The next person gets charged $60 or $90, whatever it might be. Doctors who see Medicare and Medicaid patients have their rates, their reimbursement rates set by the federal government, or in some cases by the state government. So to see that patient, to look at their knee, the reimbursement rate from the federal government or the state Medicaid program might be $40. And they say, no, we're not going to do it. I actually think we should consider a pilot program that provides a delta in that reimbursement rate. Should the state provide the additional $40 to ensure that doctor is willing to see a Medicaid patient? We might be moving into that space. I'll leave it at that before we get into more healthcare economics. My point is, I do think, from the enterprise perspective, we need bigger solutions that don't currently exist in our current political debate. and I think Florida's voters would be willing to say, let's experiment with some things. Let's resign over this tethering we have to the left-right spectrum and just figure out if there are better ways to provide health care to people that provide an economic return to the state. So there one more? Yes.
Hi.
We'll do two more, unless the folks will stick around for a few minutes after. Two more questions. We'll go up and then we'll go down. Yes, ma'am.
I have two questions for you, or two, I guess, positive sets as well. I'm concerned about anti-Semitism in Florida, and I'm also concerned about veteran services. I am the gift daughter of a young woman who is a Purple Heart recipient, and I find that the services are abhorrent.
Yeah.
So would you please elaborate a little bit, what is your platform, how you feel about
Sure. So veteran services and anti-Semitism. Listen, I come from a family of service. As a member of Congress, I served on the Veterans Affairs Committee. I served on the Appropriations Committee that funded the VA. I actually was the one, you may remember about 15 years ago, 13 years ago, there was this revelation that the wait times in our VA hospital systems had contributed to the deaths of veterans. That was a result of my questioning of the Veterans Health Administration IG. I pushed him on the language to get him to acknowledge that the wait times had contributed to the deaths of veterans. Anderson Cooper broke in and said, you know, breaking news, for the first time the VA has recognized that their delays and wait times have contributed to the deaths of veterans. Now I say that also recognizing that the VA provides incredible health care for many individuals around the country and in this state, and they should not be a punching bag. The VA should not be a punching bag. They do incredible work right now. But where there are service gaps, take the model I mentioned, the Medicaid reimbursement model. I've also wondered about it in this space within our veterans community, where we have seen a drawdown of federal resources for access points for the Veterans Benefits Administration or Health Administration. Should we step in and maybe fund a novel state program that provides navigators for federal benefits within the VA system? Right? Instead of having to wait for 4 months or 6 months to see a caseworker, should we actually be providing state-funded navigators to help accelerate that? I'll give you another example in the direct delivery of healthcare. For veterans who face either PTSD or other significant mental or emotional health clinical problems, there can be a wait list of 4 to 6 months to see a physician. Maybe the state should step in with state resources to provide an access point for mental health, emotional health, and PTSD services for our veterans community until they can get transitioned to federal services. I think all of that has to be on the table. When it comes to the question of anti-Semitism, listen, this is an area where I think Ron DeSantis has gotten a lot of things right. Not everything. But when it comes to some of the campus environments, ensuring for the safety of students, I worked on a project to help fund security programs for synagogues and other JCCs around the state in a time of emerging anti-Semitism to ensure that their facilities could be protected. Here's what I will tell you as the guiding principles behind how we balance and protect free speech and public safety. And the jurisprudence has existed for 100 years. This isn't controversial, it's just a matter of using the resources of government to ensure it's properly applied. Free speech should be guaranteed, absolutely everybody, to say anything they want. The context of that, based on a Supreme Court decision, is time, place, and manner. Time, place, and manner. Provided it is in an appropriate time, place, and manner, the government needs to protect an individual's free speech. It is true of assembly. You can't assemble in the middle of an intersection, but you can assemble on the sidewalk. It is true of religion. You can engage in general accepted practices of religion, but when you begin to endanger an individual, then the government has a right to step in and intercede. Free speech needs to be protected. It is a bedrock, and it exists on our college campuses, and it is generally healthy that it exists on our college campuses. But when it moves out of time, place, and manner, and creates an intimidating environment, creates threats of violence, or makes people feel incapable of exercising their religion or being who they are, then we have created an unsafe environment for people across the state of Florida, and it's right for the government to step in and return to the protection of free speech balanced against the protection of public safety and an individual's right and freedom of their own religion. Please. Yeah.
So what do you plan on doing with that?
And guess what? On day one, the next governor gets to close Alligator Alcatraz. It was open because Ron DeSantis seized the land from Miami-Dade County under an emergency executive order. If I end the emergency executive order, that land returns to Mayor Cava in Miami-Dade County. And we no longer administrate Alligator Alcatraz. As I mentioned, we should have detention facilities sufficient for the capacity needs of a safe community. But we don't need to celebrate it. We don't need a step and repeat. We don't need a ribbon cutting. And we sure need to make sure that we're not just sending somebody who their only, grievance of the last 12 years is showing up for work every day to earn a day's wage to put food on the table for their kids. That's not somebody who needs to be treated. They need a pathway to legal status and a pathway to work, and they should be celebrated for their contributions. Also share a few things, and then I'll hand it back over. Two things. I don't think border control policy is that hard to figure out. I think what we're wrestling with as a country are what are our values. What are our values? If we can figure out our values, policy is actually pretty easy. Barack Obama deported more people than Donald Trump did. But he didn't celebrate cruelty and violence. He did it systematically. He did it through a due process. He funded border security policies. The question is, what are our values? When I grew up in Miami, it was during the Vero boat lift. Many of you will remember this. Cuban refugees came over. We put Cuban refugees in the Orange Bowl, the old Orange Bowl. We put a chain link fence around it. It's a hard political question. The country didn't know. What do we do with all the Cuban refugees? Bob Graham, Jimmy Carter, Mayor Ferre wrestled with, what do we do? What do we do? They had a summit down in Miami. Everybody was expecting Jimmy Carter to have an answer. Bob Graham had an answer. Jimmy Carter goes back to D.C. He didn't write that day. He later did, and he didn't write that. Mayor Ferre walked in front of the microphones and said, if we don't welcome the refugee, we might as well throw the Statue of Liberty into the beach. Something like our values can be. Look, we're the greatest nation in the world because of immigration. The greatest threat we face today is not immigration. As I mentioned, if there are violent activities, if there are property crimes, if there is corruption, someone should be held accountable for that regardless of their heritage or where they were born. But I will also tell you this, we should not escape the fact. The words that we can all probably repeat to each other. The words from Emma Lazarus on the sonnet, The Great Colossus, that's affixed to the Statue of Liberty. Bring me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to be free. We all learn it, we hold it throughout life. We know it, you can finish it for me. What we often forget, we don't learn, are the words, the lines just before them. Before the line, give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to be free, there's this. Keep, O distant lands, your storied pomp. Meaning old world nations, old Europe, keep. You're famous, you're fabulous, you're successful, you're wealthy, you're rich. Keep, O distant lands, your storied pomp. Send me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to be free. The next line, you're homeless. Homeless. The wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send them to me. Behold, I lift my lamp by the golden door. I think we're a nation strong enough to reflect the words of Emma Lazarus. I think we're a nation strong enough to welcome the refugee, to create a pathway to legal status, to allow multi-generational access to the American dream. I think it makes our nation stronger, more capable. Those are values that I believe we have to return to before we'll ever figure out our border policy. I'll close with this. I'm going to ask you to do one thing tonight before handing it back. It's very simple. I'm going to ask you to believe. Believe. In this moment, believe. Believe in something better. Believe in hope. Believe that we've got a shot for a new direction. Believe that in this moment, where voters are screaming for change, that in this state that is so desperately looking for a new direction, believe that we have it within reach, that we have it within our abilities to bring change to the state of Florida. I know we do. And I think you do because you're here. not believe we had a shot at change, you wouldn't be here tonight. You would be at home Googling Portugal. Well, that's where we're all going to end up if we lose this thing. We're not going to win this thing. This is all we want.